What's up, YouTube? For whatever reason, my microphone has like buzz on it. I don't know if that'll affect the sound at all, but if it does, maybe I have some sort of an excuse. But anyway, I played in an RCQ yesterday. That has nothing to do with this video. I just thought I'd say it. Anyway, here's Dimir Death Shadow. So this league was, I think, from stream like a week ago. So it's on the VOD on Twitch if you want to see it there. As always, link in the description to not only the Twitch channel if you want to come catch a live stream, but a link to the Twitter, first place it gets updated whenever we go live with the new stream. We've got the link to the deck list on there, the link to the Cntrlfreak Discord if you want to come talk to Dimir Shadow. We did have a couple people in the Discord top 32 some challenges this weekend with Dimir Shadow. So bunch of really great, awesome, recent results and people that have a lot of real gameplay experience with the deck. So if it's one that you're thinking about picking up or you might already have picked up and you're looking to improve your gameplay, then bunch of awesome players over there. If you want to come say, hey, talk about the deck, talk about sideboarding, anything else, which does kind of segue into the fact that we do have a sideboard or like a matchup guide series here on YouTube. So if you're curious about a specific matchup, maybe like Death Shadow versus Scam or Death Shadow versus Rhinos or Burn or whatever, I do have a playlist of all those put together. And it's essentially a composite of different Death Shadow archetypes versus different decks in the format. And we go over things like play patterns to look for, sideboarding options depending on the variation of Shadow that you're running, things to look for pre and post board. So really cool series. Each video is like a 30-ish minute breakdown of a matchup. So if you want to check that out, know that it's available to you. Otherwise, let's go ahead and hop into this video on Dimir Shadow. So a lot of my main deck hasn't really changed too much recently. I'm currently in the process of trying out like Spell Snare, Stern Scolding out of the board, trying out Narset on and off, Subtlety, Force and Negation, bunch of stuff like that just to see how they feel. Shieldred's Edict. So there's a long list of cards that I'm trying out, but I'm not really overdoing any of them yet. A lot of the core of the deck I found is been very, very stable for me. Like the Shadows, Seizes, Consider, couple Stub, Counterspell, Dress Down, Drown in the Lock, Bowmaster, Wraith. I really like Street Wraith. I know some people are fond of going to like 4 Preordain and some number of Consider. I really like having Wraith's ability to kind of turn the corner with Shadow. Plus, you feel a little more confident keeping one landers when you have a Wraith. Preordain, obviously, the better cantrip to finding second land, but being able to like hold up Stubborn Denial or Spell Snare, Spell Pierce something with a Wraith, really nice. Or being able to Thought Seize plus Wraith and kind of give yourself a little middle ground, little best of both worlds kind of scenario. So really appreciate that. In the sideboard, again, a lot of these test cards, second Subtlety, Force Negation, the Stern Scoldings, an extra Spell Snare in the board, extra Shieldred's Edict in the board. Mainly just wanted to see if they're functional in the matchups that I kind of want the first copy in, like will a second look better? Otherwise, a couple Spreading Seas for any sort of big mana, Dress Down, mostly for like Amulet Titan, for Hardened Scales, stuff like that. But you get a lot of value against knocking Urza Saga tokens, taking haste off of prowess threats, things like that. An extra Stubborn Denial, Flusterstorm for the Cascade stuff, a couple extra removal spells, ease, a lot of the normal stuff. Normal stuff you see in just about every Dimir Shadow sideboard. Might just have the numbers flexed around a little bit. But anyway, let's get into match number 1. We are on the play. First hand, let's go back over. Yeah, first hand, just double Murktide, couple spot removal spells in the Bowmaster, but nothing really going on for it. So pretty easy shit back. Second hand's kind of what we want to see. Thoughtseize, some cantrips to help find some more relevant spells. Got a piece of interaction with Fatal Push. We've got lands, so we're just looking for threats at this point. So start off with the Thoughtseize. Take an Ardent Plea is the only Cascade spell they have in hand. I think this is a Beanstalk deck because Lorien revealed Ardent Plea. I usually don't really see Ardent Plea out of Rhinos. It's usually out of the Beanstalk decks. But they've got this split card that like copies a creature or does something else I can't even remember. And I'm a little terrified because immediately when I see a card I don't recognize, I think it's got some significant play to it and I'm going to get got. But we're just kind of playing the draw go game. Like we could play out of Murktide, but we tap off of Drown, and I don't want to tap off the Drown and have my opponent like resolve up the Beanstalk and something like that. So a little bit awkward. Find an ice for my Watery Grave. We'll take the opportunity to flash in a Bowmaster. They do have another Fire and Ice to ping it off, so I'm just going to protect my Bowmaster a little bit here, because if it is like a one-ring deck, if they untap and Lorien revealed, then I want that Bowmaster to be alive and kicking. They do go for a Violent Outburst, and we find out that it is not up the Beanstalk. It is a Cascade Rhino deck, so we got pretty punished for saving the Bowmaster. I'm sure somebody is going to watch the video and be like, oh yeah, it was obviously Rhinos based off some card. But with all the Up the Beanstalk decks recently, like I've seen Fire and Ice out of them. I've seen Lorien revealed, obviously. I've seen Ardent Plea out of them more than I've seen it out of Rhinos. So to me, I didn't see something that said, oh yeah, this is 100% Rhinos. But maybe that like split card gave it away, the green-blue one. So if there was one of those signals that I should keep an eye out for, please let me know down in the comments, because I would love to know. I think that's a huge, huge, huge part of Modern, is being able to recognize signals of when a deck is something versus something else and being able to adjust quickly. So we'll go ahead and pop in with Murktide, kill off one of these Rhinos, because unless they get rid of both of my creatures with like a Fury, they're not going to be able to swing through for lethal. And Lorien revealed, obviously a very good card, but we do get to ping down the Shardless Agent, outgrow the Rhino token. Now we force a chump block with the Rhino, put them down to 1, so they're dead to another Bowmaster. They're dead if they draw a card. They're dead to any of our 3 attackers. Stubborn Denial of the Rhinos. We could, like, let the Rhinos resolve and try to Stubborn Denial something to answer the Murktide, but I kind of figured they'd have a dozen ways to kill the Murktide, like another bounce spell, another Leyline Binding, something, especially with 5 cards in hand. So I kind of wanted the bodies off the board, trying to not have it backfire here, but opponent ends up scooping after a fairly long tank here. So they did not have anything. We get to steal game number 1. Fortunately, Moto's also pretty slow. The Moto recap is slow. But sideboarding against Rhinos. Dress Down coming out. Spell Snare, I could keep in to try to fight over like Fire and Ice, but that's probably coming out. The Force Negations, EE's coming in. Trim on some amount of spot removal, like maybe a Fatal Push or a Dismember too. I want to keep in some removal because there's a decent chance they're going to resolve a Rhino spell. So being able to like kill some of them is relevant. Going to go in for their F6 value. Get the Thoughtseize away. Shardless Agent. So now I'm playing out the Shadow here because if they do top deck a red card for Fury, it sucks. But if they go for Shardless Agent, then I've got Untap, Push, Dismember. If they go for Leyline Binding, then it means they're not Shardless Agenting, and I get to hold up the Force of Negation next turn. They end up Leyline Binding the EE, which was kind of an interesting spot, because that means, hey, I get, like, everything. I get to keep my Shadow, I get to keep all of my spot removal spells. Opponent not playing their Shardless Agent means they got either, like, a bounce spell or a Violent Outburst in this case. I want to point out, if you do the math, we could force a negation this Crashing Footfalls, then we attack, they untap Shardless Agent, blah. Or, since we know their last two cards are Fury Shardless Agent, we can let the Rhinos resolve, Fatal Push one, pay 4 life to dismember the other, and then pay 2 more life for our Watery Grave, and have a Lethal Shadow on the crackback. And I don't know about you, but I like lines that end the game a decent bit. So I try to look for them if possible. I miss them all the time, but I try to look for them if possible. Game number 2. Really good Shadow hand, like the double Wraith, the Fetch, Shock, Thoughtseize on 1. This is, again, like one of the reasons that I really like Wraith is enabling Shadow, enabling that secondary threat that's actually, like, relevant. We'll take a Hallowed Fountain. It's not the most exciting land in the world, but it does get Shadow online. Opponent's got to spend their turn cycling a Troll to get out this, or to get their mana available. Get the Violent Outburst out. Unfortunately, if they do just like go for the Outburst, I'm kind of in some trouble. So go for the Bowmaster just to try to force the Outburst. We've got double Wraith in the yard, so it's not like we're completely out of the water or anything. Now here, I cast the Shadow. They do have a Subtlety, which we knew about. Ditching the Shardless Agent. Counterspell it, and their 2 blind draws were another Subtlety and another blue card. So that kind of hurt. That wrecked a lot of our plan there, because now if we like dress down to try to stay alive, because we have to dress down to be able to block the Troll. But if we go for this, then another Violent Outburst means they get back double Subtlety, and we have like nothing good to deal with that. Double Subtlety and a Troll. Feeling very trolled. And we're just going to hope they don't attack. Opponent calls our bluff. And we die. So, them top decking the second Subtlety and the second blue card there did us in, but I don't think we were in a position to play around that in any way. Maybe we could have just played out a smaller Murktide, but I didn't want to exile Wraiths from my yard. I wanted to hold up Counterspell if possible. We do get to go to game 2, sideboarding against Living End. Pretty much all of the spot removals coming out, all the Fatal Pushes, Dismembers, whatnot, and boarding in anything I have that says counter a spell. So Mystical Dispute, Force Negation, Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, Stub. Not bringing in Spell Snare, clearly, but pretty much everything else is coming in. Bringing in, if you are running Chalice, that's coming in. So yeah, as you can see on screen, we Thoughtseize and we see the card Night Pack Ambusher, standard all-star from the Simic Flash decks for a while. I don't know how good those decks actually were in standard, but either way, opponent chooses not to main phase the Ambusher, which is fine with me. Like, let me untap with all my mana. Cool. Go for the Ambusher. We are going to counterspell the Ambusher. Important here to counterspell, not drown in the lock, because if our opponent does have Force Negation plus a blue card and are able to counter our counterspell, then we need the Drown in the Lock to be able to kill the Ambusher next turn. But if we go for Drown in the Lock and they force, then we're just dead in the water to the Ambusher. Flashing in Bowmaster, trying to incentivize my opponent to go for a Violent Outburst right then and there. So I know they have a Force Negation. They only have 5 mana. So I'm trying to tap down low. So if their last card is like Violent Outburst blue card, they go for it into turn where they don't have Force backup, and I get to force it instead of going to my turn and then risk them having like Outburst blue card for it. So opponent goes for turn 1 Grief. We're going to turn 1 Subtlety. They put the Grief on top, and we follow up with a Thoughtseize, which we see they do not have another black card for this Grief. So we kind of get to ignore it a little bit. Just take the Endurance, take the Waker. We've got Flusterstorm and Force to fight over a Cascade spell now. Opponent shocking in the Stomping Ground, so maybe they're wanting to bluff Violent Outburst because they don't go for anything. They might have it. Not really sure. Can't think of a lot of good reasons they would shock that in. But either way, with like Flusterstorm, Force, Counterspell, feeling pretty safe. Just like a little kind of general rule of thumb sequencing, if you're up against these Cascade decks and you're running Flusterstorm, try to save Flusterstorm for your turn. So if they like Violent Outburst on your turn, Flusterstorm's a lot better because you get to essentially say the stack is over here and not have to worry about Force Negation, where if you go for like a Counterspell on your turn and they have Force, then now you have to spend another Counterspell to deal with Force, and it might tap you out early. So if you Flusterstorm on your turn, there's a good chance you're going to be able to hold up Counterspell on your opponent's turn and fight over another Cascade spell on their turn. There's sometimes that saving Flusterstorm for later is better, but most of the time, I'd say save Flusterstorm for your turn. It's a little more impactful. The opponent's going to go for a Grief, ditch a Grief, second Grief, ditch a Grief, or ditch a Troll, sorry. We're going to counterspell both of them because I do have the Force of Negation and the Flusterstorm. So, like, I feel pretty protected from a Cascade spell here. What I don't want is for them to, like, take all of my counter spells. I know I'm countering their counters, but I get to save my good counters, so it kind of works out. We'll take another counter spell. So opponent's down 3 Griefs. There's a very good chance they've got some number of Force of Negations in hand. So I think this Flusterstorm is going to be pretty important for fighting through those. For people asking about the Hallowed Fountain, because usually somebody does. So here, opponent outburst on our turn. We're going to Flusterstorm because I want the stack to be over. They could have, I guess they couldn't have double Force Negation. That still doesn't do it. But either way, get all that over with. Top deck at Thoughtseize. We Thoughtseize, and lo and behold, they did have Force Negation. So, like, our decision to force or decision to Flusterstorm instead of going for like the counter spell paid off. So we didn't have to go through multiple counters on their turn. I'll just hard cast Force to be kind of mana efficient. Little replay button there. On to, this is match number 3, I believe. Turn 1 Delighted Halfling, so I'm expecting like a Samwise combo deck. off of Temple Garden. Never mind. This is about as bad of a start as we can possibly see with this deck. Turn 1 Halfling. We've got very, very few removal spells, so really good chance that Halfling's going to stick around. And then Halfling into Teferi, second Halfling. Like, this is scoop it up point, and it's honestly not even close. Like, we can't deal with uncounterable planeswalkers, especially with Teferis and Solitudes. So if you ever have to ask yourself what is the worst possible matchup you could run into with Dimir Shadow, this right here. 1 mana dork, makes all your stuff uncounterable. Teferi, Solitude. Nope. Sideboarding, I could say what I'm sideboarding. Honestly, doesn't really matter. Like, if you got Shieldred's Edicts, they're coming in for sure. Force and Negations, pretty solid. You want to trim on spot removal because Halfling is the only thing they have that you can really hit. But at the same time, having an answer to Halfling is so ridiculously important that you kind of have to get lucky one way or the other. I could play out the Murktide here, but if my opponent has a Solitude, exiles the Murktide, doubles up on my Shadow, then the game is just actually factually over. So instead, I'm going to wait a turn, try to hopefully hit a 4th land to be able to Murktide plus Counterspell. Do find a Halfling. I think this was my punt turn. Yes, they cast a Teferi, and I just, for whatever reason, completely forgot that the thing was uncounterable. I'm like, oh yeah, throw a counterspell instead of casting my Bowmaster, and just brain fart. Like, cannot describe it any other way. Unfortunately, even if I tried to cut my opponent's internet connection down there just to make them disconnect, didn't work out too well. They came back. But even if, like, I had remembered I couldn't counter the Teferi, I really wasn't in any kind of position to have a chance there. Because, like, I could shoot the Halfling, kill the Halfling with the Drown and the Lock. In which case, they still have a Teferi. My Shadow still gets bounced. I could Bowmaster in response to the Teferi. That's a little bit better. I guess the best case scenario would have been Bowmaster, ping the Halfling. They bounce my Shadow. I ping the Halfling again. Untap, kill the Teferi, play Shadow, hold up, drown. If that worked out that way, that would have been best case scenario. It would have relied on my opponent, like, not having a follow-up, not having an answer to Shadow, not having an answer to Bowmaster. But it would have made the game more competitive. We'll put it that way. Obviously, they had a lot of stuff. Probably wouldn't have mattered, but would have been a lot closer. It was definitely a mistake on my part, 100%. So get to go to round number 4. Another pretty reasonable hand. Interaction, counter spells. Opponent's on Tron, so we are going to do one of my top 3 favorite plays in all of Modern, which is Soft Stub, a turn 1 expedition map. Makes my heart happy. Chromatic Sphere is fine. We will counterspell an Ancient Stirrings because my opponent's played 2 of the same Tron lands, so I'm assuming they're a little ways off of being able to do anything relevant. Another map. I could force the map. But at this point, like, I kind of want to save the force for a payoff. Like, we've disrupted Tron a little bit. I potentially can find a real threat. We Bowmaster with the best of them. Got to play Bowmaster on our main phase here because Chromatic Sphere is a mana ability. So I can't respond to them cracking Chromatic Sphere and drawing a card. It doesn't use the stack. Mana abilities don't use the stack. So I've got to make sure the Bowmaster is on the battlefield already whenever they decide to crack the sphere. Little value out of our force, getting to tag that Karn. And it's basically going to come down to whether or not they find a payoff here. To crack the sphere, we get to ping them a little bit more. Fingers crossed. 12 mana, big walking ballista, no proponent scoops. Bowmaster FTW. That's one of the reasons, like, I saved Force against that map, is like there's such a good chance that they find Tron anyway that I'm just going to try to stop something as soon as they do and hope they spend a couple turns kind of spinning their wheels. So another reasonable start against Tron. Like, we've got Shadow, double Thoughtseize. We could Thoughtseize on turn 1, but when they lead on the Chromatic Sphere or the Star, I really like waiting, maybe catch a Sylvan Scrying. That was kind of the game plan there, and here we get to double up our Thoughtseizes. This one was like long Magic Online delay, so let's skip ahead a little bit. So we end up taking Chromatic Sphere and a Karn. Leave them with a Haywire Might. You have a Saga for a map and find a Chalice of the Void, which they decided to play the Chalice instead of playing the Haywire Might, or instead of playing the Haywire Might first. So they've actually locked themselves out of having that Haywire Might. Love to see that. You have Shadow. You have a counter spell, double counter spell. Sylvan Scrying, we will counter because I don't want that around. Opponent's got a Walking Ballista for 1. So could be some awkward timing here. Decide to pass and hold up counter spell, dress down on their instep. Takes out the construct token. The Walking Ballista can grow before the dress down, but at least it's not killing me yet. And honestly, what I should have done here is stub my own dress down, like stub intentionally into the Chalice to get another card in my yard for Murktide and just be like super mana efficient that turn. So we pass back to my opponent. They don't have enough mana to attack in, pump the Ballista, and kill me, or just pump the Ballista one time. Instead, they go for an Ancient Stirrings into their own Chalice, then an O-Stone. I knew, and you can go back and check the video if you don't believe me on Twitch, I knew that the Stubborn Denial was going to get chaliced, but again, I just want to put that stub in the yard for potential Murktide. We attack him with Shadow. I could fetch, but then I'm dead to Walking Ballista getting pumped up. So we go for the end of turn dress down. And this is super fun. Go for the end of turn dress down so that my opponent can't pump up the Walking Ballista. They're really incentivized to attack in here. So that I'm dead on my upkeep to them just like ticking down the Walking Ballista. So because they're incentivized to attack, I get to flash in subtlety as a 3/3 ambush viper for free and hold up counterspell. So I definitely get like a little bit of everything here. Now I can't beat them having another land to pop O-Stone. Or I can't beat them, but I would get to untap with Murktide plus counterspell. So I'm not complaining about that scenario. But like I can't untap and just kill them if they find fifth land. So we're kind of at their mercy, except they didn't find fifth land, so they scooped. On to round number 5. Again, on the play, another pretty good hand. Like, at the end of the day, your entire deck here is just cantrips, some sort of interaction, threats, and as long as you have, like, 2 of those 3, you're kind of fine. Mix in lands. So, opponent Steam Fence, Spell Pierce, or Thoughtseize. So now I'm kind of thinking it could be creativity, because red fetches, Spell Pierce, no Giganta, so it's probably not Shadow. It could be like one of the Shadow variants with Murktide, but Jetmir Garden, I think, kind of throws that theory out the window. So now I'm pretty positive it's creativity. The giveaways, again, typically like all red fetches, all mountain lands that they get. All lands have the subtype mountain for Dwarven Mine. And then obviously the Dwarven Mine itself, kind of a pretty decent indicator. So they reprieve our Bowmaster. That's kind of okay. We get to Bowmaster ping again, just keep the board a little clear. Find a Murktide Regent, which means we can Murktide, hold up Pierce, and a hard Stubborn Denial. Fatal Push in case they go like Dwarven Mine into creativity. Always love converting on a Spell Pierce in like the mid to late game. So obviously gonna take the opportunity to fight over the Fable with that instead of Stub, because Stub's gonna be way better for us as the game goes on. If there's too many more turns. So they're going to try to creativity our Murktide. We will Stubborn Denial that, and opponent's going to scoop it up and get to go to game number 2. Sideboarding. The Bowmasters are pretty good. They're not great, but they're okay. Spell Snare is good if your opponent's on like Renin 6. It could be okay here because we saw Reprieve as well, but I'm still like less excited about it because most of those 2-drops aren't actually winning the game for them. They're just kind of like okay value pieces. I'd rather fight over Fable and creativities themselves. Persist would be a good reason to keep Spell Snare, but I would only do that against like the Jund version. I wouldn't do it against any of the blue versions. Could Spell Snare a Celestial Purge, but again, kind of narrow. So let's get down to Spreading Seas on your white source. This also puts them off of what's it called? Thing being online for a turn. Dwarven Mine. So now they have an island in the mix instead of all mountains. Shock in a Sacred Foundry so they can hold up Celestial Purge. But we're going to flash in a Bowmaster. And if you want to purge this, awesome. Because that means I get a Shadow. Or something. Take the extra land, because land... don't really have much of a better answer than that. So they do have creativity here, which they could go for. Thankfully, we've got Bowmaster, which they cannot Flusterstorm or Spell Pierce. They'll get to stifle a creativity with that. Untap with Shadow, double Counterspell. Double Counterspell. Drown Unlock's basically counterspell. We're going to ignore this Ren completely because who cares if you have an extra token? We're just going to hit you in the face with shadows. Go for another creativity. We know they have the Flusterstorm. I could like use the Drown on this, but I'm just going to assume that they don't have another Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm and just pay for the Fluster. Then I can untap and Drown Unlock the token. Like, I couldn't beat another Pierce or Flusterstorm anyway. So I might as well just save my Drown, go for the kill next turn. Thankfully, it pays off. That being said, even if they did have another Spell Pierce or another Flusterstorm to resolve the creativity, getting an Archon means I just sack the token, ditch like one of the dead cards in my hand, probably ditch the Drown, and untap, attack him with a Shadow. They're forced to a chump on the Shadow, and then I just play the Murktide and like say go. So I'm not in a horrible position if they resolve a creativity there. That being said, I don't necessarily want them to resolve a creativity. But yeah, back to the drawing board with Dimir Shadow. Always fun. What did I think about some of the changes? I thought Subtlety and Force were both really good. Shieldred's Edict, I don't think really came up. Spell Snare. I don't know if Spell Snare came up. I think Snare's like really good if we get back into a Murktide meta, or if you're playing against a bunch of Beanstalk decks, it's good. If you're not playing against Beanstalk and Murktide, I think it's pretty underwhelming, but that's just my personal opinion. You're welcome to have differing thoughts. What else? Drown, great. Dress Down, fantastic. Bowmaster, good. What am I missing? Stern Scolding, I didn't bring in that league, but I think it's like Yawgmoth is a nightmare matchup. So Stern Scolding helping you to interact with like Grist and Yawg itself and stuff against them is really, really worthwhile. Probably don't want the extra spell snare in the yard. I think post board against like the Beanstalk decks, being able to bring in Force and Negation, the extra stub, probably reasonable enough. And the EEs, maybe. If you're really concerned about blowing up Beanstalks. The downside of the deck, the same thing it's always been. You can have a lot of times where you're just like slow on getting a threat. I think once you get any of your threats down, as long as you're like smart about when you get them down, you can kind of protect them pretty well. But a lot of times I do want that maybe like 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th actual threat. Bowmaster, I consider like a threat with a big asterisk. Like, it can have its moments, but it's not always a consistent threat. It kind of depends on what your opponent's doing. So really it's like the 4 Shadow, the 3 Murktide, and then kinda the Subtlety and the 3 Bowmasters make like an additional 1 or 2 threats. But you've seen me play Shadow of Mortality in the past. I like that one. Unfortunately, with like the 4 non-black sources in the deck, it can be a little awkward at times. Might go try out Archmage's Charm again, just have a little more card advantage, but we'll see. We'll try out some stuff on stream this week, so feel free to come check it out, see what it looks like. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. I'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.